Hello everybody, my name is Sam Harker and welcome to Reviewsday, where we are reviewing not The Office, even though we are reviewing Vertigenous Golf, and let's start off with the review. Before I get into the review proper, I would just like to say that despite the fact that I use the awesomes to talk about stuff that I love, and the same so far is true of our Reviewsday, that's not necessarily the be-all and end-all, because this is not my favourite thing. I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing, and I've definitely played worse games, and I think it is in a way kind of interesting, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I feel like a good chunk of the game is a bit misguided. My review of the game is, firstly, it's a mini-golf game. You might be wondering, why didn't they just call it a mini-golf game? It's like, oh no, because it's in the sky. At which point you ask, why don't they call it like something other simple like Vertigolf? But there's already a game like that. So they just went with Vertigenous Golf, which is needlessly complicated. Which actually I just realized is a pretty good metaphor for the game. It's an interesting idea. It is mini golf, but in the sky, and it's steampunk version. And the thing is, you can have kind of a regular mini golf game, but they have kind of a story mode, and the story mode is the thing that I kind of have the issue with, because I'm the kind of gamer that goes straight for the story mode, because I'm interested in the campaigns, and I'm interested in narrative, but I feel like in this case it's very, it's just very misguided, it's very out of place. So, this game, I kind of want to focus on the story mode, based on the fact that that's the thing that I find interesting, because one of the theories that I've kind of had of games is, and kind of my ideas of like what games should be like, because I think everybody kind of has an internal kind of thought about like, oh, how important is blank and how important is the other thing. And by blank and the other thing, I mean storytelling and gameplay. Presentation is kind of cool too, but that's not necessarily the first thing for me, because I mean, you can have awesome 8-bit games that are better than the like super high graphic whatever the fucks. And the idea that I kind of have is that like gameplay should be like a fairly solid foundation. Like obviously you can't really have a good game without good gameplay. I mean, you can have those kinds of games that are all story and then they have minimal gameplay, but that relies firstly on an incredibly good story, and even if it is an incredibly good story, the odds that that will make up for the fact that it's essentially a movie that you have to have limited interaction with means that it's in a lot of trouble. My idea is more that you have to have good gameplay, and then you can add a story which will kind of create context and will kind of give kind of motivation for moving on. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that's an essential. And in walks Vertigenous Golf. It is a sports game that wants to have a really nice story to it. And I understand the idea of wanting to have a sports game with a nice story to it to an extent. For example, I've played kind of the older Mario Tennis and the Mario Golf Advance Tour kind of things, and those kind of have a story. Like, they have a story in the sense that, like, who's that mysterious red-capped mustachioed fella? After a couple of rounds you end up playing golf with him, or like playing in a tournament with him. And in that way it kind of makes sense, because like the game is a progression from you're an amateur to you're an all-star. And that kind of makes sense. Like, it's by no means overbearing, it's just kind of a thing to put in the middle. There's no, like, giant character development, but they'll talk and stuff when they lose. And they will lose. But with Vertigenous Golf, it's not so much a supplementary as it is, like, injected. And I do use the word injected because it literally feels like they're forcing it through you. The story mode, which will probably be a lot clearer once I actually upload a video game thing of this on my gaming channel, involves checkpoints. So they'll have these little vinyl discs that you have to shoot your ball to get the next bit of the story, but the kind of slamming it down your throat part comes in where you have to go to all of the checkpoints before you can finish the hole. And that becomes very aggravating very quickly. These gargantuan par fours that take 10 shots to get anywhere near the hole, and once you get to the hole, it's like, oh wait, you forgot that one over there, so you have to backtrack, and it just becomes needlessly complicated and aggravating. Like, it gets to the point where it doesn't even make sense why they're making it so complicated. In fact, in many ways, when you compare it to a simpler game, like, for example, one of my childhood favorites, 3D Ultra Mini Golf, that was a game where every single hole was kind of a new theme, whereas this one, they're all kind of the same, just with increasing amounts of complex geography. Like, you have ones with floating islands, and you have glass houses, and you have bloody tractor beams or some shit. And it doesn't become more special, it just becomes more confusing and in many ways more pedestrian. And on top of that, the actual story is just really not in sync with the actual game. They take the incredibly fun, childlike game of mini golf and pair it with a political story that's just like Gattaca. At the risk of sounding harsh to people who like Gattaca, Gattaca is pretty much every kind of trope that I kind of hate. Seriously, it's tragic so that everyone's either crying or internally crying, or they're all emotionless zombies. Read, there is absolutely no drama whatsoever. They have a really contrived, oh, this is going to segregate this into the rich and poor in a very obvious way. I mean, I guess I kind of understand his social commentary, but it gets very boring very quickly when it's literally just like, all the rich people get to be on their float. Like, there's literally a movie, I don't even remember what it's called, but had the same kind of idea of the rich people are in the sky for whatever reason, and all the people on the ground are on the ground for whatever reason. It's just... And there were kind of flashes where I was like, that's really interesting that this thing is connected to this thing. Like, for example, they talked about a thing that they use in the menu screens, and you kind of like, oh, I'm one of these lower plebeian kind of people. And in many ways, there were kind of environmental kind of messages and like discrimination messages, and my thing just turned off. That's really sad. And yet, you're playing mini golf. I mean, in fact, it actually really reminds me of, I don't know if anybody's seen 009 Re-Cyborg, but that was a movie where they took Cyborg 009, a beloved childhood anime, not of me, but, and then they made it about God and religion. I mean, that's just a very big ticket item to assign to a children's anime. To have him grow up that quickly that he's fighting like some preconception of God. Like, what? So yeah, ultimately when it comes down to this kind of is an instruction that maybe putting a story isn't always the... And if we are being honest, mini golf has nothing to do with political revolution, so there's not a great connection between the two. Not really my thing. Maybe if you're into steampunk and you're into Gattaca, might be into this a bit more than me, and if that's the case, go for it. It's just, for me, it really just shows a giant misstep. So anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. I'm going to have my Awesomes of May coming out tomorrow, hopefully. Yes, and this is going to be in here for nominee for worst game. It's my first worst award and I'm not really proud of it. Okay, bye.